Good morning to you all. Lovely to see so many of you on today's call. Thank you for joining us. For those that haven't been on previous Pimento calls, this is in fact our sixth weekly event of the year so far. We run a series of events across the year in association with the Alliance of Independent Agencies and the PRCA. Something like, I think, 12 events a week rather. We do record them. The reason we record them is that so many members are unable to join these calls because they're busy in meetings, and they always ask to be able to actually follow up and watch the video, which is available on the Pimento catch-up channel, which is on YouTube. Just put Pimento Agency YouTube into the channel, and off you go. For those that don't know me, my name's Stephen Knight. I'm the founder of Pimento. Really sort of quick update on where we are in the world of COVID. The really good news is that nearly 21.5 million people have now received the coronavirus jab across the UK. That's an amazing figure. The number of new COVID cases is falling daily, and in fact, actually in the last week, it's down by 30%. And then obviously the consequential impact on related deaths is also falling rapidly. And today is budget day. I suspect all of you are pretty much aware of what's been promised to the budget, since pretty much everything's been leaked. I'm sure there's a few questions yet to be answered. I worked out this morning that with the £280 billion that will have been spent as a consequence of COVID, that equates to something like £4,201.61 per head of the UK population. So it's a stonking figure, will have been spent over the 18-month period taking us to November of this year. Furlough is expected to be kicked down the street again until September, giving the economy an opportunity to bounce back and to absorb some of those predicted job losses, which is also very good news. And the changes in income tax, which I'm sure we're all worried about, are unlikely to actually raise a huge amount of money. I mean, relatively speaking, 6 billion, I think, is that they're talking about it will raise. So it gives you some idea of the 280 billion that we spent, what the size of the task is ahead of us. Most importantly, and I suspect that the one that Nigel's probably most concerned about today, is whether or not he decides to increase duty on alcohol, but we'll come to that in a moment. Now, today's presentation wouldn't have been possible had it not been for the wonderful Catherine Brown, who's on the call today from Hippolyta. Hippolyta is a member of the Pimento network, and they are masters in bringing together a network of best-in-class trusted organizations and individuals to fast-track growing businesses. They deliver a very broad range of services for their clients, including corporate finance guidance, consulting and corporate solutions. And their scope also covers areas such as corporate and investor communications and support to ensure their clients are in shape and prepared for gaining traction with investors and stakeholders. They have a client base of small and medium-sized enterprises. They also serve larger organizations preparing for that important IPO. Catherine Brown, who's the CEO, and her team have worked with the Lakes Distillery since early 2019, helping them via investment banks and finding opportunities to introduce investors, including single and multi-family offices, hedge fund investors, ultra-high net worth individuals, syndicated wealth funds in the UK and Hong Kong and elsewhere. So if your business is looking to raise capital, you now know where to go. Thank you very much, Catherine, for the introduction, and welcome to the world of whiskey. Whiskey, as most of you know, and I'm sure you have appreciated some of your whiskey over the years, is a product that essentially in the past came from Scotland, Ireland and the US. And today, more than 30 countries produce the amber nectar around the world. And if you look at what they're now calling the new world distilleries, there's a massive growth in those organizations, and very exciting to see so many new distillers around the world creating a wonderful product. Nigel Mills CBE is the co-founder and CEO of the Lakes Distillery. He was born and educated in Newcastle upon Tyne. He attended Lancaster University to study economics, accountancy and law, and joined Pricewaterhouse Newcastle soon after. He's a trained accountant. He qualified in 1984 ahead of a move to London, where he worked with the firm's major audit clients, and then returned to the Northeast in 1986, where he established a chain of newsagents that grew over 25 years to become a national chain of convenience stores with over 2,000 employees. Business was sold to Tesco's in March 2011, but under his leadership, it received multiple awards, including the Grocer Magazine's Independent Retailer of the Year Award in 2008. He went on to become a founding member of the Entrepreneurs Forum, a Northeast-based not-for-profit organisation which helps aspirational entrepreneurs scale their businesses through the inspirational power of storytelling and mentoring. Nigel joined the board in 2008 and served as chair between 2011 and 2017. In 2018, he was awarded CBE in the New Year's Honours List for his services to entrepreneurship in the northeastern Cumbria. And he was the co-founder of the Lakes Distillery in 2012. And since then has gone on to establish the Lakes brand around the world. The vision was to create a global luxury single malt whisky brand. And to date, the business invested more than £30 million to deliver on that ambition. It operates in the global whisky industry, which is worth something like £11.4 billion annually. And it is classified as a new world whisky. And he'll explain to us what he means by that today. And also the growth of that particular category. The business is looking to IPO in the next 3 years on the AIM market. So get in there quick. And we will be opening up today's session at the end for questions. So I'm really pleased to welcome Nigel to today's call. I hope that all of us will get the chance to ask the questions. I've actually received lots of questions from members already. I'm going to put his presentation up on the screen and we'll get going. All right, just make sure that I've actually got it on screen. This is where technology gets in the way. Oh, and I'm going to go back one. Okay. There you go. Right, sir. Let me unmute you. We can hear you.
Right. Can you hear me, Stephen?
Beautifully.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, first of all, thank you very, very much for that wonderful introduction, and also thanking Catherine for the opportunity to present today. Welcome to the Lakes Distillery. This is one of my favourite photographs of the Lakes Distillery. It's an old Victorian model farm built in 1860. It was completely derelict when Paul Curry, our co-founder, found it in 2010. And I think that's a picture from the car park looking down the buildings with one of the stillmen rolling the casks. So it really is an evocative image. If we just go to the next slide, please. So what is New World Whisky? New World Whisky is whisky that's produced in any region apart from Scotland, the US, Japan, Ireland, and Canada. And as Stephen pointed out earlier on, there are now over 30 different countries producing New World Whisky. It's a dynamic subcategory of the whisky industry. It's all about opportunity, it's refreshing, it's exciting, it's new, and it's all about flavour. Worth around about £2.6 billion at the moment, and it's the fastest growing subsector of the world industry, whisky industry. The drivers of growth: premiumization, people drinking less but drinking better, digital connectivity, cocktails, innovation, and if you're British, international appeal. Despite Brexit, quality products from Britain still have international appeal and they're still in demand. Back in 2012, when I became involved with this business, we felt that there was an opportunity within the world of whisky to create something new and dynamic. If you mentioned New World Whisky back in 2012, nobody knew what on earth you were talking about. But fortunately, the word New World Whisky now is becoming more and more understood and accepted. And if you go on the internet and look at Distill Ventures, they produced a report and a video last year defining New World Whisky and also talking about it and why it's such an exciting, dynamic part of the world. So it's taken us nearly 10 years to become, well, for people to make sense of what we're doing and the business that we're operating in. If we go to the next slide, please. If you're going to create a great business, what you need are great people. And what we have managed to do over the past 10 years is to put together a very, very competent board and also senior management team. So if we look on the left, Tim Farrisman is our chair. Prior to that, for 8 years, was a guy called Dr. Alan Rutherford, who's one of the world's experts on the Scotch whisky industry. He helped take us all the way through to an attempted IPO in 2018. I recruited Tim to the board in June 2018 when we sort of moved from a shareholder-based board to a PLC-based board. And I wanted Tim because of his city connections, and also one of the many businesses that he backed over the years was Fever Tree, which we were all aware of the success of Fever Tree. And I wanted to have his expertise and his reputation representing the lakes. We also have a guy called Paul Neep. Paul Neep is the former CEO of Glenmorangie. When Paul was at Glenmorangie, he opened the Ardbeg Distillery and helped sort of rebuild that brand across the world. Paul Neep at Ardbeg was the marketing director, CEO, and then latterly he was the chair under the ownership of LVMH, and he very much helps us in terms of our brand building and development. We also have Richard Hutton, who's the current FD of Greggs PLC, who helps mentor David Robinson, our financial director, below there. And then lastly, we have Craig Wilkinson, who represents a family office called Core Capital that invested over 5 million as to date. So in the words of the city, we have a £1 billion board, a really, really effective board. And they're not just board members, they're mentors, and they're standing shoulder to shoulder with the senior management team to drive this business forward. In terms of senior management team, you've got a picture there, Kirsty Taylor. She's our marketing director, joined us in 2018, and she's responsible for the new brand image and all the photography and everything else you see at the moment. Davil Gandhi, our whiskey maker, joined us in 2016, and he is one of the world's leading experts on sherry wood maturation, and we'll come on to that a little bit later on. He's ex-Macallan, and his expertise in preparing casks to be able to give up the colour and the flavour that very much defines New World Whisky, and in particular the Lake single malt whisky. Greg Levins joined us in October 2019, ex-Brewdog, ex-Diageo, our first UK sales director. And then Andy Bowie joined us in March of 2020 as our export sales director, formerly Diageo and Treasury Wines. And because of COVID, he's never stepped outside the UK. So an interesting challenge for him, as you can imagine, for the last 12 months. So what you have is an amazing opportunity in New World Whisky, and what you have is an amazing team that are qualified and skillful enough to help deliver on this vision. At the opening of the presentation, it was how to build a global luxury single malt whisky brand, and then it should be, the caveat should be the first 10 years, because I can assure you this journey is far from over and there is an awful lot to do. If we go to the next slide. Thank you. I'd just like to take you through the journey so far, just to explain how the pieces of the jigsaw have been put together. So in 2020, Paul Curry, our original co-founder, found the site in the Lake District National Park. His father was Harold Curry, and his father had been the managing director of Shivers Brothers, one of the sort of biggest brands of Scotch in the world. He and his father built the Arran Whisky Distillery in 1995. Paul had left after about 7 years because his shareholding was diluted through new investors coming in. And he was looking for a new site to build an English whisky distillery in England, and he found it in the Lake District. It took around about 18 months to get planning consent, because you can imagine in the Lake District National Park, an area of outstanding natural beauty, and to do anything that's of a sort of a commercial basis outside of one of the established towns or villages was incredibly difficult, but Paul managed to do that. And when we got planning consent, he created the company in September 2011. I met Paul in April 2012. I read in a newsletter that they'd managed to find or to obtain planning consent in an old Victorian model farm. And I thought that was really interesting. I have a hotel nearby as part of one of my investments. I thought that they'll have tourists. We've got a hotel. It'd be great if those tourists used our hotel. So I met with Paul, showed him around the hotel. He thought it was great. And I said, well, when are you going to build it? And he said, well, unfortunately, all of my funding has disappeared. And this is during the financial crisis, 2008 onwards. So I sat down, having sold the convenience store chain in March 2011. I thought this is a great opportunity. I think similar to the New World wine, the Australians and New Zealanders, who took the best of the old wine production from Old World, added a greater thoroughness and rigor to making wine. And now they're the #1 winemakers in the world in terms of volume. And I felt a similar opportunity existed in whiskey. So naively, I thought this is a great opportunity, put a business model together. And as with all businesses, what you need are great mentors. You need people who have the skill sets that you don't have. And through our networking organization, I met Dr. Alan Rutherford, who, as I said earlier, was one of the world's leading authorities on the Scotch whisky industry. I showed him the plan. At that stage, New World Whisky really wasn't the terminology, it was English whisky. And at that stage, there were only 2 other English whisky distilleries in existence. I said, what do you think of the plan? And the plan was based on a sort of multi-income stream role with tourism, food and beverage, export, UK sales, internet sales, all of the different things which I'd learned over my career with the convenience stores. And he thought it was a great plan because of the multi-income streams and the length of the time our journey would be. So I said to him, well, if you think it's so good, will you put your reputation and join us as our chairman, an English whisky company? And he said, yes, I'd be delighted to. So that was a great endorsement of what we're trying to do. More importantly, to have somebody of that gravitas join us was hugely beneficial. In 2013, we set out to raise money to develop the site and also to buy the stills. One of the things we did was to enable us to convince people that we could produce a whiskey. We actually bought whiskey from the wholesale market in Scotland and Ireland, and we created a blend called the One, and we launched that in 2013. So we effectively, in 2012, 2013, raised £6 million, and we start the development of the site. So we go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Great. In 2014, we start the development of the site. And we also, because we could, we launched a gin and a vodka, because the timeline from creating the alcohol to distilling that with the botanicals for gin and distilling it purely with vodka means that you can get that product to market much more quickly. And we launched those in the autumn of 2014. But more importantly, we completed the renovation works on the 15th of December 2014, and then the first spirit flowed on the 16th of December 2014. Really exciting. 2015, HRH Princess Anne officially opened the site, which was fantastic. And we had over 70,000 people visit the site, and sales were going quite well as distilling. However, the question at that time that I asked myself was, what was the guarantee that the whiskey in that cask, and bear in mind at that stage we were filling bourbon casks, which is traditional way to mature whiskey in Scotland. What was the guarantee that that whiskey would be any good? So I approached Alan again and said, Alan, can we find ourselves a world-class whiskey maker? And through Alan's connections, we found a gentleman called Dhaval Gandhi. Born in India, educated in America, 2 degrees, one in IT and computing, the other in business. Qualified as a chartered accountant, was a consultant. His passion was whiskey, so he left America, went to the Heriot Watt School of Brewing and Distilling in Edinburgh, graduated, couldn't get a job in whiskey, so got a job on the research and development side of Heineken. After 4 years, he was head of R&D in Europe for Heineken. And interesting, the first stage of making whiskey is to create a brew. So those skills will eventually prove invaluable to us. He eventually was asked to work with Macallan. And when he was at Macallan, he specifically worked with a cooperage in Spain in developing the casks to yield the most in terms of flavor and color and improve the quality of the whiskey maturing in those casks. He joined us because his vision was to put his name on one of the world's best single malt whiskies. Our vision was to basically create a global luxury single malt whiskey brand. Our 2 visions were aligned, and he joined us in 2016, and that was absolutely pivotal. In 2017, we employed a chartered accountant, David Robinson, became our FD. And during 2017, we won a couple of accolades for our visitor experience, and World Whisky Day named us as one of the 8 distilleries to visit before you die. But more importantly, during 2017, Davil Gandhi changed everything that we did in terms of spirit and cask production. He took that knowledge and that supply route from the cooperage in Jerez, and he changed us to a sherry-led, wood-forward, flavour-packed single malt whisky distillery. He took our cost of production from £300,000 a year to 1.7 million, which you can imagine created quite a challenge. But if we're going to create something really, really special, that's what it took. Ahead of launching our first single malt whisky, which was scheduled for 2019, and Davil put back that launch date because he didn't want to launch anything with his name on it that wasn't the best it could be at that point in time. So we then looked for a marketing director to help create a truly outstanding brand, and a brand both in terms of look and story that would match the quality of the liquid that was inside the bottle. Kirsty then set about changing everything in terms of the brand. She appointed an agency called D8, based up in Glasgow after a beauty parade. And with D8, we looked at the story behind the lakes. In other words, the brand had to be a truth. It had to be very much linked to our geography, in other words, England, but specifically the Lakes District National Park. And she took our marketing budget from around about £20,000 a year to this year, it will be £1 million. And a lot of the photography and the imagery that you'll see is a guy called Alex Telfer, who won International Photographer of the Year in 2017. And I was just saying to Stephen earlier on, he charges between £3,000 and £8,000 a day. And this is all, but the imagery and the way that our brands are portrayed through his photography is absolutely stunning. And we'll see more of that later on. So that was really important. We had somebody who could help us create the quality of liquid and the complexity of that liquid in terms of flavor profile. We had an accountant to try and keep us in check. And we also had a marketeer that had the skills and ability to help us create that luxury global brand. We also, to mark the fact that we had whiskey that was 3 years and a day old, we put the first 100 bottles, and that's all we produced, 101 bottles actually, put 100 bottles onto an auction site, and we broke the world record for the highest price paid for the first bottle of single malt whiskey from a new single malt whiskey distillery at £7,900. We won many more awards for our visitor attraction. And then what we tried to do was to IPO. Now, the reason we want to do that is we wanted to triple our production capacity to go from 400,000 bottles a year to 1.2 million. And that was the sort of quantity that put us in the same category as Bruichladdich on Islay, owned by Reme or Glenfarclas. We also needed to increase our marketing budget, and we also needed to spend £3.5 million increasing that production capacity. The change in the board in June 2018, and all the rigors and all of the due diligence that you have to go through before IPO, we went through in 2018. And that process effectively allowed us to really crystallize our thoughts about what we were as a business, what we needed in terms of resources. And the business grew up about 2 or 3 years in that 1 year, rather like what the pandemic's done to digital marketing and digital retail over the last 12 months. Sadly, we failed to raise that money because when we were in the final stages in October 2018, the market turned against us. And it's amazing how quickly that happens. And more importantly, a lot of the mid-cap funds that we were raising money from had to support Patisserie Valerie, which was a chain of effectively coffee cake shops that sadly had declared themselves in financial difficulties because of fraud. And we had to withdraw gracefully from that IPO. However, not all was lost because the board was transformed, the vision of the business and the strategy was transformed, and it enabled us to progress with a great deal of confidence. If we go to the next slide, please. In 2019, we managed to raise over £9 million off market, mostly through high net worths and family offices, which was a miracle because we had the challenges of Brexit. We were awarded an icon of whisky by Whisky Magazine for our new brand. We were identified in the January of 2019 as one of the world's whisky brands to watch by the Spirits business. And then in September 2019, we launched our first single malt whisky, Whisky Makers Reserve, which is the sherry-led house style, which sold out. And ever since we've launched our first single malt whisky, it has been on allocation in terms of UK supply and abroad. That's enabled us to command a £65 price point, which is an extremely high selling price for an English New World whisky, single malt whisky. And also what it's allowed us to do is to place the whisky in the right retail outlets, bars, restaurants, etc., and not just try and flog it, which is what a lot of new whisky distilleries are trying to do. So 2019 was a great year. We released 12,000 bottles of single malt in that year. Our sales at that stage are roughly 90% of our blended whisky, the one, and gin and vodka. But as I say, we released 12,000 bottles, but we actually had 1.4 million bottles in stock. Because if you're going to build a global brand, you need stock for the future to be able to sell both an age statement and a non-age statement, as well as special cask releases. In 2020, we were all set to expand our sales, both in the UK and internationally, and the pandemic hit, which, as we're all aware, has had a significant impact on most businesses. But fortunately, we were able to pivot. And fortunately, because of the money that we raised in 2019, we could get on with distilling, laying down stock, because the one thing that you can't buy in the whisky industry is time. And what it allowed us to was to start that £3 million plus investment to enable us to triple our single malt whisky production. And that is now coming to a successful conclusion, because from April, which is next month, we'll be able to turn the taps on and step up to 800,000 bottles a year, and then to 1.2 million bottles later on. We were ranked as the 19th of one of the fastest growing food and beverage brands in Atlanta's 2019 report, which was fantastic. We rebranded the One collection and released Whisky Makers Reserve #3, which was again a sellout. It's on ration. We managed to secure the first asset-based lending facility for an English whisky distillery, and that's really important because we will spend £3 million a year putting whisky into casks that we won't monetize for 5 to 15 years. In the Scotch whisky industry, they actually fund their stock build through this sort of asset-based lending facility. And we've managed to secure that because of the quality of our liquid, and more importantly, the sherry-based wood that liquid goes into. Just to give you a feel for what it means to invest in sherry-based wood, a bourbon cask to us is around about £70, and that's an excellent cask. It comes directly from the USA. And the rules in America say that bourbon can only be matured in brand new green oak casks from America. After that, effectively, they're no good to the bourbon industry. So they're sold into the whiskey industry around the world. About £69, £70 for those casks. Our sherry wood casks cost between £700 and £5,000 each. So you can see the difference that Davil brought to this business. We managed to raise another £7 million, again off market during the pandemic. Part of that was the government's Futures Fund, which has proved invaluable to many scale-up businesses struggling to raise cash over the last few years. And the rest of it was equity from high net worth individuals. So since the IPO, we've raised £16 million in a combination of debt and equity. Despite the pandemic, because we had started with a multi-revenue stream business, our internet business grew from £400,000 of direct sales to 1.1 million last year. And also through our routes to market, the third-party websites, and also through specialist retailers, we managed to achieve 90% of our 2019 turnover in 2020. which we were delighted with. And we did that at the same time as placing the brands in the right outlets and not having to do anything stupid. And then the London Stock Exchange Group named us as one of the 1,000 companies to inspire Britain in 2020. So that was a great accolade. So throughout all of these difficult times, we've continued to build brand equity. We've continued to build stocks to release in the future. And we've maintained our quality first agenda. In 2021, as I said, what we're going to do is that we will release up to 9 different single malt whiskies this year. The main one is Whiskey Maker Reserve number 4, which is our sherry-led house style. That will be around about 12,000 bottles. But to maintain talkability about our whiskey, our single malt whiskey, we will release 9 different editions. And these are special releases where the liquid has been matured in a combination of bourbon, sherry wood, red wine, or port casks or others. And each one of these releases will either be exclusive to a top-end retailer, or will go into certain channels. And each of the whiskies will reflect a mood or a passion. So the taste and the flavor will reflect that mood or passion, and the branding and the style of the whiskey will reflect that. And this is all about the innovation that New World Whisky brings to the world market, and it's all about that demand from the consumers for quality, not quantity, and the demand for something that is really full of flavor. So the business is now really well placed. I'm delighted to say we've got about £6 million in the bank, so we can deliver on our plans over the next couple of years. And we are really well poised to start to scale up once this awful pandemic hopefully settles down, and we can return to some sort of normality. So if we go to the next stage, please. The art of whiskey making. There's a picture of Davil. He's in his whiskey studio. We last year completed a £600,000 investment in a state-of-the-art whiskey studio that is at least as good as Macallan's, where Davil came from. In terms of making a single malt whiskey, 20% of the flavour and the character of that whiskey comes from the spirit, and around about 80% comes from the wood. So you can see how important they are. But more importantly, you have to create a spirit that gets the most from that wood. So it's rather like a gearbox and engine. If your gearbox isn't tuned to your engine, you're not going to get the power. If your spirit isn't tuned to the wood, you're not going to get the flavor that you want from that particular wood. So Davil has absolute end-to-end control, from creating the spirit, manufacturing the casks to our precise requirements, the maturation. Our warehouses, the casks are racked individually, and we follow a process called élevage, whereby you nurture, you raise each cask, or the liquid each cask, and there's a natural process where the liquid reaches an optimum, and at that point you either bottle or you move it into another cask to take it on the journey of the next leg. Davil spends roughly 3 months of each year in Jerez at the cooperage there, which is called Miguel Martin. Davil is one of 2 of the world's leading experts on sherry wood maturation. He oversees the construction of the casks, the toasting of the casks, and what the toasting of the cask does, it actually caramelizes the natural sugars in the wood. So when the spirit goes in there, it gets more of the flavor. And you can see a picture there of the cask being effectively charred. It looks a very destructive process, but it's not. Now, what Davil will also do is specify each cask will be designed to create a different flavor profile. So rather like an artist, a great artist, before he paints his masterpiece, he will start with a palette of colors. And then with that palette of colors, you will start to mix and to blend to create shades of light and dark. What Davil is doing is creating a portfolio of whiskey maturing in cask that gives us a huge bandwidth of flavor. So when he comes to blend, and again, we look at the perfume industry where you have the top, middle, and low notes. to create that multifaceted flavor profile that distinguishes the Lakes single malt whiskey from other malt whiskies around the world. So there's a huge amount of investment. Just to explain, we use Spanish oak and we use French oak. The sustainability agenda is absolutely to the fore when it comes down to cutting down these trees. They're then replanted en masse. You can't just chop down a Spanish oak tree unless you have permission. It has to be at least 80 years old. Then you have to replant. The wood is then cut into staves. The staves are then air dried for between 1 and 5 years. And what that does is it gets rid of a lot of the natural tannins that leach out of the wood to cleanse the wood so the wood can give up its color and its flavor. You then sort those staves. You keep around about 40% because 60% will have knots or lesions in them, which will taint the spirit. You then shape those staves into a cask using flame, which is derived from the staves that you've rejected because you don't want to use gas. It's cheaper, but it'll taint the wood. You then toast them to the exact specification to get the flavor. And then what you do is you season them with different sherries. So we use Oloroso, PX, and Fino, and each one of those sherries will again penetrate the wood to different ways. So it's quite a long process, and then we'll season those casks for up to 5 years. So you can imagine by the time the cask reaches us, it's at least 80 years old. And this is part of the luxury of time and then the art of blending. So what we do is we respect tradition, but what we do is we go further than anybody else. The strapline in Formula One is engineering insanity because a thousandth of a second can win you the race. What we have is distilling insanity and maturation, I guess, insanity, where we go that extra mile. So that's our whiskey making. That's why we're different. If we go to the next slide, please. In terms of building the brand, it's all about sharing stories, leveraging digital technology and insight, building engagement, creating sensory explorer experiences such as the site visitor and supportive collaboration. The great thing about what's happened over the last 12 months is that digital influencers and the printed word are absolutely brilliant for us. It's affordable, we can get really good reach, and we can build our brand over time through the power of the storytelling and everything else. Next slide, please. That's the Whiskey Maker Reserve. The bottle is bespoke to us. It's made by Allied Glass in Leeds. All of our packaging, all of our bottling now is onshored. That wasn't a Brexit strategy. It was to do with the fact that we're English and we want to source everything in England. The bottle has got a bespoke quatrefoil shape at the bottom. Quatrefoils are the sort of window shapes which prevail in our old Victorian model farm buildings. It's a Celtic symbol which means faith, hope, luck, and love. Faith, hope, luck, and love. And it's absolutely all of the attributes that represent our brand, but it's also everything that we needed to achieve to get to where we are in the first 10 years. It's a wood-forward, sherry-led, flavour-packed house style, and those are the gold medals that it's won. So thank goodness I appointed Davil in 2016. If we go to the next slide. These are Whiskey Maker's editions. They're exceptional diversions from a sherry house style. And what they do is that they allow us to express ourselves in different flavour profiles of single malt whiskey. Single malt whiskey is a really diverse and exciting liquid. It's very much a mood liquid, so we can make whiskies if you want to celebrate. We can make whiskies that if you want to relax and decompress. We can make a whiskey to suit any mood or any ambience that you can imagine. So it's a very versatile liquid and very exciting to work with. If we go to the next slide, please. This is the one, originally launched in 2013 to allow us to help raise money and prove that we do know what we're doing with whiskey. The portfolio is very, very different now. It showcases our whiskey makers' maturation expertise. So we buy liquids in, there's around about 25 aged malts in each one of these bottles, as well as the lakes. We buy special casks, port, sherry, orange wine from Jerez, muscatel recently. We then mature them in those casks, or not mature them, but finish them in those casks for at least 12 months. We then blend it, marry it, and then we bottle it. And I urge you to try it. The new one muscatel on the far right there is very much a spring liquid. It's very light, very easy to drink. And it's the epitome of coming out of the darkness of winter into the sunshine of spring and summer. So if you want to explore the world of whiskey, that portfolio is where you should go to. The next slide, please. Our Lakes gin, again, it's been repackaged and remodeled. And last year we launched the Pink Grapefruit Full Strength gin. It's a wonderful gin with 9 simple botanicals that supports the Lake single malt in terms of building routes to market. It's also a very vital profit earner in the early days. And if you look at the premium gins in the market, such as the Botanist, that's owned by Bruichladdich, whiskey maker. If you look at Hendrick's, it's William Grant, whiskey maker. If you look at the Edinburgh gin, it is Ian MacLeod's, whiskey maker. So some of the best premium gins in the world are made by whiskey makers because they understand distilling and they understand flavor. Next slide, please. This is our Lakes vodka. It won the world's best vodka in the Vodka Awards 2019, which was remarkable. It's made in a separate copper pot still that we have on the site. We use British wheat, which is the most expensive ingredient, which is what you'd expect from Davil. And the fact we use the British wheat gives it a very smooth, creamy mouthfeel. So it's delicious. We also make a salted caramel liqueur, which actually won the best chocolate liqueur in the world in 2019. All of this is because of our whiskey maker. The next slide, please. This is our global ambitions. We're in certain markets and not others. The US is the biggest market for premium single malt whiskey, and that's our focus for the second half of this year. We're already in Japan, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, and we'll also be launching in China later on this month. Next slide, please. In terms of route to market for the UK, it's all the top end internet retailers, restaurants, bars, hotels, etc. And those are an example of some of the specialist retailers that we're in at the moment. Next slide, please. In terms of responsible creation, or ESG, we from the very beginning have embraced that. We're in a UNESCO World Heritage Site, the Lake District National Park. So we have biomass boiler to produce our hot water and to heat the place. We have dark skies lighting on the site to protect the dark skies. We have our own sewage plant. The barley that we discard after making the wash for distillation is cattle feed, and the pot ales left after distillation of fertilizer. And we will be very much developing this ESG agenda moving forward. The next slide, please. Reasons to believe. We're building brand equity. We have done from day one. We've just finished the first 10 years startup, so we're now in the scale-up phase. We have the increased production capacity. Single malt whiskey appreciates over time, so our stock each year is revalued by around about 10 or 15%, which allows us to borrow and therefore fund in the long term our stock build program. New World Whisky is at the vanguard of the world whiskey market. It's exciting, innovative. People are interested in it. It's all about flavor. We have a first-class team who are able to build brand and to build this business. We're a multi-award winning business, and we have a track record for growth. And also, last but certainly not least, we are a responsible creator. And then the final slide. And that's it. And our purpose is to take the lead and to follow our instinct, which is what we've done for the last 10 years, and what we will continue to do to make a difference in the world of whiskey. So thank you, Stephen.
Thank you very much, Nigel. So for those that aren't familiar with whiskey and whiskey production, fascinating discovery there, I think, for all of us. And equally too, you know, when it comes to branding and developing brands, the level of detail that obviously has gone into the development of the Lakes Distillery brand and the way you've extended it into different categories and into different alcohols, really, I think, is a fantastic case history. And I'm sure as branders and as marketeers, all of us can learn from the work you've done there. I've got a few questions, if I may, Nigel. I'm going to put you on the spot. Put you centre screen if I can. Here we go. So the first question I've got is, obviously, COVID's been particularly hard, I think, for both the certainly the on-trade. There hasn't been anyone. With the off-trade, obviously, one of the things that government sensibly did was to keep off licenses open and allow people to be able to purchase alcohol through this period. What's that meant for both your distribution strategy and for business more generally?
Well, it's meant that we've had to sell more through the internet, both our own internet site and also third party. But in actual fact, it's been really, really positive for the Lakes the last 12 months, because the consumer has had more time, that everybody sat at home, and they may be working at home, but they're also sat at home. So the fact that we've had such a reach through the internet channel has allowed us not only to sell, but also to educate our future customers. And when the site reopened for about 3 months last summer, it was just amazing the number of people that came to the site. I mean, our sales were way up, and we'd actually spent nothing on marketing that site. It was people had clearly seen or become aware of our brand through the internet, both our site and third party, and had come to visit the sort of spiritual home of the distillery, which is why we built it to such a high standard. So that has been nothing but a positive, and I think it's been a positive for a lot of the emerging brands that have had a bigger share of voice than they would have had otherwise. Clearly, the on-trade, traditionally you build your brand in the on-trade, you build awareness in the on-trade. In the UK, the on-trade is £12 billion in terms of the alcohol industry, and the off-trade is about 10 billion. The off-trade's picked up about 4 billion of the 12 billion that's been lost in the off-trade, but there's a lot, clearly there's a lot being lost. So we've done well, but when we reopen proper, and we all reopen proper, hopefully from the 17th of May this year, we're hoping that because of all the work we've done the last 12, 15 months, people are more aware of us. And when we get back on the shelves and back in the bars and back in the restaurants, we'll see our sales grow really, really quickly.
You're talking obviously about the brand experience and the ability to be able to come to the distillery, go to the restaurant and really immerse yourself in the brand. And a few weeks ago, we had a call about the future of the high street, and we were talking about actually the importance of experienced brands really changing the high street and finding new ways in which people can engage. I've got a question here which it goes right to the point from my point of view, and I totally agree with this question. It's a brilliant question. And it's from a keen cigar aficionado. And, if there was ever a product that goes hand in glove with whiskey, it is cigars. Are there any plans to have a cigar room up at the Lakes?
To be honest with you, I hadn't thought of that. I mean, actually, what goes hand in glove with whiskey, because of the different flavor profile, is food. And, we have a whiskey experience that tastes chocolate with our single malt whiskies. And the chocolate's made by a guy called Ian Burnett, who is based up near Picklockery. He won the world's best chocolatier award a couple of years ago. There's a repeat here because we tend to work with people who also are passionate about what they do, and they have proven their expertise in what they're doing. So we have a bistro on the site. We have our consultant chef, which is a guy called Terry Laybourne, who's an ex-Michelin star chef based in the Northeast. So very much for us, it's food and drink that are the pairings that we're exploiting. I think in terms of cigars, I think that's more for others to exploit rather than ourselves.
Okay. Talking about obviously those partnerships you've got with those leading practitioners in each of their area. What about brand partnerships? Have you thought about any brand partnerships with other luxury brands?
Yes, we have. Kirsty Taylor, marketing director, has been talking to various people. One of the first collaborations I think we're going to do is with a multi-award-winning Michelin star chef who is currently opening up new restaurants, or will be later on this year, up and down the country. And again, that comes back to this food pairing that I talked about a few minutes ago. So yes, in terms of other ideas at this point in time, I'm not aware of what Kirsty has on the agenda. She tends to keep it to herself and then tell me when she's almost there.
Thank you.
I just find the money.
Absolutely, yeah. That's the role of marketing, to innovate and take your money.
And to spend it, yeah.
In terms of digital, I mean, you've spoken about the influence that's had on business performance this year, particularly, I guess, in social, your ability to tell your story. Again, this might be a question for Kirsty, but do you see a developing role for digital? Do you see it expanding upon what you're currently doing?
Well, yes. I mean, part of our brand building is storytelling, and digital is perfect for storytelling because people can go on there, not just see the product, but also read about what we're doing. With luxury goods, people, first of all, they have to taste, extraordinary. Secondly, people want to experience where they're made, and that's where the distillery site in Northwest Cumbria comes into it, and winning all those awards for the best visitor experience, et cetera, really important. And then lastly, people want to feel good and feel that they're doing good by buying our spirits, and so therefore our packaging and our. So, for instance, the boxes that our spirits come in, they're 100% recyclable. Which is the first, I think it was the first for luxury goods. And then everything that we do on the site is preserving or protecting the environment in which we operate in. I mean, people often say to us, what is it about the lakes in that bottle that is typical of the Lake District National Park? And what we say is, it's actually not that it's the Lake District National Park, the natural beauty that inspire us to create something exceptional. So it's the inspiration of our environment that's in that bottle.
Question here from Judith, if I may. So obviously the world of whiskey is evolving very rapidly with all these new brands, etc. What are the competition? What are the old guard doing to try and protect their brand share, or is it growing the market overall?
Well, we met with Distill Ventures, which is the venture capital arm of Diageo, many times and asked them to invest in us, but they wouldn't. And then the third time we met with them, after Dabble had been with us for about a year, they said, wow, you've now got something that will grow the market rather than displace the market. So that's why we're able to command a price point of £65. But what's happening is that the target audience that we're after, which is a sort of adventurous connoisseur, people who travel to extraordinary places, people who are looking for something which is different, they want to be the first to find it. It is a very competitive market, but we are well placed to create our own space in that market because of the location, because of the expertise, because of Dabble. I mean, Dabble, as one of the world's leading authorities on sherry wood maturation, travels the world giving lectures on what we do with sherry wood and how we go about creating those flavors. So he's not just the whiskey maker, he's actually a global ambassador, and people in the know are seeking his advice and seeking his wisdom on that. And what that then does is permeate out from the trade, for want of a better word, into the market, into the people who are really interested in learning more about whiskey and understanding the flavour and variety that liquid can give.
We saw, Nigel, how particularly some wine makers around the world have sort of diversified their product portfolio, and we've also witnessed, obviously, the ways in which their product has been consumed. You've heard these apocryphal stories of, bottles of Chateau Latour being basically mixed with Coke and Krasna as well in Japan and China and elsewhere. Johnny Walker, famously, obviously, has gone beyond that to the classic whiskey culture and has stretched their whiskey brand, if you like, by mixing and cocktails and pre-mixes, etc. Is that something you could ever see or foresee that you might get involved in?
Well, one of the drivers of the sort of premium sector is the cocktail culture. And if you look at our website, you'll see that we are promoting the use of our liquids in cocktails. The Scotch whisky industry used to be very prescriptive about how you should drink whisky. If you now look at what they're doing, they're saying basically enjoy. It's up to you. As long as you enjoy it, you can drink it however you want. But this comes back to the versatility of whiskey, because whiskey is very much a mood spirit, and it may be it is appropriate to drink whiskey in a very tall drink with a mixer, the appropriate mixer in the summer when you're looking to refresh, or in the winter to drink it neat or with a little bit of water when you're sat in the home and it's a storm outside and you're trying to sort of relax and chill and all the rest of it. So the way that people drink it, I think, very much reflects the mood or the ambience. And again, it proves the versatility of whiskey. Just coming back to the question before, if you look at the major brand owners, Diageo up to this point really didn't have much in the way of visitor experiences. A couple of years ago, they announced they were spending £150 million on new visitor experiences at the distillery and also in Edinburgh. And I think later this year, you'll see the new £65 million visitor experience on Princes Street, the old House of Fraser store, being unveiled, because Johnny Walker is a blend. And what's happening in the market is that single malt whiskey is taking all the headlines, but blends are also exceptional spirits. And so what Johnny Walker has to do now is the challenge is to try and balance the momentum for single malt whiskey, which is determined as premium, with their blended whiskies, which are also premium. And they're doing that by investing in that visitor experience concept that we did from day one.
Well, I mean, that brings me on neatly to our final question of the day, and that really relates to the fact that obviously Johnny Walker is well known for being, I think, Scotland's largest and most profitable export, I believe. I don't know if that's still the case. Mm-hmm. Certainly up there. How has Brexit changed your business, and what are you foreseeing in the future in terms of the impact on Brexit?
Well, the good thing about Brexit is that if we didn't have a deal, we'd revert to WTO rules. Every country has its own duty that charges on alcohol, and every country has its own rules and regulations on the content of any liquid that you import into that country. So at the end of the day, it doesn't have a lot of impact on the spirits industry. The biggest impact has been in America, where as part of the sort of tariff war that's going on between America and Europe, there's a 25% tariff on single malt whiskey, but only single malt whiskey, not blends, from Scotland and Ireland. I mean, fortunately, the Americans didn't realize that there was also single malt whiskey from England, so we're not subject to that. So we've dodged that sort of bullet at that stage. The only thing we've had to do for Europe is we've had to register an office in Dublin, so that we can put the address of that office in an EU country on the back of our label. And that prevents us having to produce 27 different labels for 27 different countries. It's going to cost about £5,000 a year. So it's an inconvenience, but it's not too bad.
Brilliant. Well, good way around the problem. I'd like to thank you, if I may, for telling your story today. It's been really, really illuminating and very inspiring. And we've had some really good feedback on your presentation and the learnings and outtakes. So thank you very much to yourself, and also
you're welcome,
Catherine, for bringing us to your attention. Just cut a short notice for the rest of the team on the call. Our next Pimento talk is in 2 weeks' time. It's on Wednesday, the 17th of March at 11 a.m. same time. We're going to hear from 3 entrepreneurs that set up during COVID, all in the same sector, all doing slightly different things, but they've also had a very exciting experience and also have got a good story to tell. Next 5 p.m. club is on Thursday, the 18th of March at 5 p.m. It'll be hosted by FX Digital. And good news, the Pimento networking events will restart on the 12th of April. These events basically will take place across the UK, 5 walks planned across the country. So if you fancy a stroll with 5 other members and guests, the country pub, followed by a glass of single malt, no doubt, outside, of course, then please do contact your partner directly. We're organising those with them. We hope to get those going every month across the spring and summer period. So once again, thank you very much indeed. Have a great day, everybody.